scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Good rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And we got some appetizers for you this evening, and this will be UFC main event podcast for UFC 291, Poirier versus Gaethje 2. And this event happens on July 29th, 2023 at the Delta Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I imagine this being a fight that's in the US, it probably start at 10 Eastern, 9 Central time. And this card, just taking a step back and kind of looking at it, it looks like a pretty good card, you know. I mean, the only thing that kind of makes it a little underwhelming is that there's no actual title on the line for this card. They got the BMF title made up, a fake Gaethje title, you know, that was first fought for quite a couple of years ago between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. So, I mean, they're fighting for a title that was never lost, I guess. Jorge Masvidal never was beaten for the title. So, was he stripped of the title for not defending it, or is he an interim champion, or is this an interim title, BMF title fight? So it's a little clownish, a little bit, that they're bringing this belt back again. I mean, the whole reason, it's obvious, the whole reason they're doing it is just so they can say they had a title fight for the main card, pay-per-view card, and they're back on track for just having a pay-per-view card. Like, it was just the last pay-per-view that was so great, UFC 290, where there was actually a month in between this card, but there was only 3 weeks in between this card. And I think for 292, it's the same thing. Like, this event happens on the 29th. I want to say that card is on like the 19th or something for 292. So it's just like, you know, just a couple weeks later. But anyways, let's get into this main card and see what I think about some of these cards on the main card and who I think has a better chance of winning. So can I get a menu? And for the first card here, we have, it's a first fight on the main card is a welterweight bout between Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland. And just my first thoughts of this fight, like, and just the whole card in general, is that there's a lot of notable name brand fighters on the card. There's shouldn't really be any fighters that you're unfamiliar with. So we all know Michael Chiesa and Kevin Holland. You know, Kevin Holland's, you know, he's a really, you know, a true grit kind of fighter, you know, because he stepped in last minute to fight Hazmat Chimaev at a catch weight of 180, which everyone knew that going into that fight he had like no chance, but he even himself knew he had no chance, but he still stood up and fought in that fight. And then we all, I mean, if you followed UFC for a while, you know better than to talk about Michael Chiesa's mom. Don't talk about his mom. And if you're a referee for one of his fights, don't stop that fight early. You better let him go to sleep or get his arm broken off, because he's gonna come at you. He's gonna be very upset if you talk about his mom or you stop the fight early. So if you know anything about these two fighters' history, I mean, they're I wouldn't want to say that they're marquee fighters of the UFC, but they have a lot of history and a lot of funny moments and a lot of good fights as well. let's talk about Michael Chiesa first here. So I think both of these fighters have had kind of a rough go of it over the last 5 fights or so. So Michael Chiesa, he's let's see here, he's 4-2 in his last 6 fights, but he's lost his last 2 fights. And one was a loss to Sean Brady. That was the most recent loss, which was a unanimous decision loss. And that was November 20th, 2021. So he hasn't fought in a long time. I was unaware of that. I was unaware. guess I missed something there where he must have been hurt or suspended or something. I don't, I don't remember. I don't remember him being out for a year and a half. But so I guess he hasn't fought. That may change my pick on who I'm picking here because I was thinking, this is kind of your classic grappler versus striker kind of fight, and thinking, just over the years of watching Michael Chiesa, he's pretty dangerous on the ground. He's a very good wrestler with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and has more submissions than knockouts. So this is actually an interesting stat here now that I'm talking about it. So yeah, he's had in his fight catalog, he has 24 fights, 18 wins and 6 losses. In those 18 wins, he has 0 knockouts. So he's never knocked anyone out, which that's kind of surprising. But he has 11 submissions. So that kind of holds true to my statement that it's striker versus grappler. And if you were to pick what he is, he's definitely the grappler with those 11 submissions, and then he has 7 wins by decision. And then with the 6 losses, he's been knocked out once, submitted 4 times, but I think he would argue quite a bit about one of those losses where he thinks it got stopped a little early while he was in a rear naked choke about to go to sleep. And then he's lost, and then he has 1 loss by decision. So, okay, this little bit of new information for me. I didn't realize that he'd been out for a year and a half. And then Kevin Holland, we know he hasn't been out for a year and a half. He's one of the most active fighters in the UFC for a fighter that's on the main cards and main events, fight nights. And he has kind of a similar record here, I guess, in his last 6 fights. So he is 3-2-1, and the 1 is a no contest between Kyle Dukakis, and Kyle Dukakis is the no contest, and it was due to an accidental head clash. And if I remember correct, Holland was the one that took the head clash. It was a really bad one, like it knocked him out cold, or when he got back to his corner after the round, or when they stop it for a second after head clashes and eye pokes and groin shots, like he was like wobbling around. So that's just a hard, I would want to say loss, but it's just a no contest, but hard way to have a fight end for either fighter or the fans. But he's won his last fight, which was against Santiago Ponzinibbio with a KO punch. So that was April 8th, 2023. So I mean, he just fought like a couple months ago. But prior to that, he had lost his 2 fights in a row, and one was to Stephen Thompson, who actually fights on this card, and that was a TKO corner stoppage. So he's gotten kind of beat up. He's been gotten beat up over the last couple of years, taking a brutal head clash and then getting have his corner stop the fight against Stephen Thompson. And then obviously we talked about the fight with Hazmat Jemaya, where he got just pretty much ragdolled to the ground and put in a Darce choke. And that happened, and that only took 2 minutes. It was 2 minutes and 13 seconds of the first round. So, man, this is a tough fight. This is like almost kind of like a coin flip fight for me to pick who I want to pick in this fight. Like, I wonder what the betting lines are. I bet it's close to a pick 'em, just because, like, if Michael Chiesa had been more active recently and won a couple fights, I think it would be easy for me to pick him to win this fight and probably maybe win by submission. But now that I'm kind of seeing that he's been out for a year and a half, it makes it a little more difficult to just pick him. And just got to make a pick for someone. So I'm just gonna take the easy way out. And I'm gonna go with the more active fighter in Kevin Holland to win this. And if Kevin Holland was to win, it would probably be, if he was going to get a stoppage, it would probably be by knockout. But seeing how Michael Chiesa's only been knocked out once in his career, and let's see, it was a while back, yeah, and it was just a TKO stoppage, and that was all the way back in like 2014. So that was like close to 10 years ago. So I'm going to go with Kevin Holland in the welterweight bout between Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland. I'm picking Kevin Holland to win this, and by way of decision, unanimous decision. It may not even be unanimous decision because, like I said, this is a coin flip fight. It may be a split decision. All right. So now on to the second fight on the card. We have a lightweight bout between Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. And I'll just mention Bobby Green because this may, I'll talk about him first just because this may lead to who I pick in this fight here. So Bobby Green, another fighter, that's kind of how it is with some of these undercard to the main event fights. A lot of these fighters have had kind of a rough go over it of their last 6 fights. So Bobby Green, he's just he is 2-3-1, and once again, his one is a no contest fight against Jared Gordon, which also was due to a clash of heads. And it was the opposite. It was flipped around. This time it was Jared Gordon, not Bobby Green, that got knocked out of the fight due to the head clash. And that's weird. I've seen a lot of head clashes, and I'm sure I saw both of these fights and saw both of these head clashes. But most time when you see head clashes, you never see the person that gets the worst of it, like getting completely knocked out. Most of the time it's usually gets stunned real bad or starts getting swelling around the eye or gets cut, usually due to it. But that's interesting here. The first 2 fights that the 2 fighters on that card both been involved in head clashes similar to that. But previous to that head clash, he'd lost his last 2 fights and both by. And so this is where I'm talking about. This may lead me to who I pick here. And both of them came by, one was by a KO punch and the other was TKO punches. So he's been gotten knocked out 2 times recently, not that long ago. The first one, the most recent one, was against Drew Dober, which was a KO punch, and that was December 17th, 2022. And then the one prior to that was a fight against Islam Makhachev, which was TKO punches, and that was February 26, 2022. So he's kind of had a rough go of his last 3 fights or so. I know you can't really control the head clash one, but I mean, it still doesn't go on your record as a win. I mean, yeah, it doesn't go on there as a loss either, but it's just a lot of wasted training camps and preparation for a fight to just basically get thrown out like that. All right. And Tony Ferguson for like the longest time, has been known as one of the best fighters in the UFC, and a lot of acclaim and stuff behind him. But, just like Bobby Green, he's had bit of trouble here in his last 6 fights. So he is 5-1 in his last 6 fights. And his last win came against Donald Cerrone at UFC 238, and that was June 8, 2020. 2019, and that makes this card really hard. This makes this fight really hard to pick here, because I guess I was a little confused on how many fights Tony Ferguson had lost in a row, but yeah, just name off the names of the people he's lost to. So he lost. This was Nate Diaz's last fight in the UFC, which was a crazy fight, if I remember right. Yeah. So Nate Diaz got him in a guillotine choke, and that was September 10th, 2022. And I remember, if I remember right, Nate Diaz had him in the guillotine choke and then was flexing with like the other arm while he had him in it. And then everyone remembers the Michael Chandler. This was UFC 274, May 7th, 2022. Everyone remembers that highlight front kick from Michael Chandler that just like they had the same kind of picture of it that Frankie Edgar got kicked with one similar, and his whole face is just like caved in. You see like the slow motion picture of it, and you're thinking, how is he not dead? How is his whole face not broken due to it? And then had some unanimous decision losses to Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira, who a lot of people think is the best fighter in that. That was a lightweight bout, and I think this bout is a welterweight bout. So he's moved up in weight since then. And then Justin Gaethje, who's on this card, was the five losses back. Was a loss to Justin Gaethje with TKO punches, and that was UFC 249, May 9th, 2020, and that came in the fifth round, 3 minutes and 39 seconds of the fifth round, and that was the interim lightweight championship. And then just that last win, in these 6 fights was against Donald Cerrone when he got a TKO stoppage against doctor stoppage against Donald Cerrone, and that was UFC 238, June 8th, 2019, and that was 5 minutes of the second round. At the end of the second round, which was a fight night, and if I remember right, that's the fight where Donald Cerrone got like his nose broken, and then in between rounds you see him like trying to breathe in and I guess force air out his broken nose, and that's the one where his eye like swole up to like the size of a baseball. So, so his last win came from pretty much a broken down retirement home, Donald Cerrone, and ever since that happened, seems like that was almost like bad luck because he seems kind of like that old broken down retirement home fighter now. If you just look at his last 5 fights. And he, I think I saw a quote from him saying that he thinks he's not even close to retirement, or that he's not even thinking about retirement, that he's the best that he's been in his career. But that just sounds like delusional talk. Obviously a fighter or any professional athlete wants to talk up how good they are. You got these 50-year-old athletes, that think they can still play any sports. They think you hear that quote from older athletes and stuff all the time saying, "I'm in the best shape of my life." Well, I find it hard to believe that Tony Ferguson is at the age of 39 is in better shape than he was when he was 25 or even 29. So, man, seeing that rough go of it there for Tony Ferguson, and I didn't go over this for either fighter yet. So Tony Ferguson has had, and I feel as if this is kind of all irrelevant just because of the hard go that both of these fighters had recently. But Tony Ferguson has had 33 fights, 25 with 25 wins and 8 losses. In the 25 wins, he has won 12 by knockout, 8 by submission, and 5 by decision. And then in the 8 losses, he has 2 wins by knockout, 2 losses by knockout. So he's been knocked out twice, he's been submitted twice, and he's uh, lost 4 by decision. So I mean, if you look at how he wins fights, he can beat you. You know, he can beat you standing and striking, or he can beat you on the ground as well. So he's a very skilled fighter, and just off the win losses, you know, he's only been knocked out twice in his career, and both of those were recent. You know, here towards the tail end of his career, some brutal knockouts from Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler. I just don't know how you're ever the same after taking a front kick to the face like that. And see, before we make this pick for Bobby Green, oh man, I guess I didn't know Bobby Green had been in as many fights as he's been in. So been in 45 fights with 29 wins and 14 losses, and similar uh, similar win category. You know, he wins and can beat you in all different ways. So he has 10 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission, and 11 wins by decision. And then he has 14 losses, 4 been knocked out 4 times, been submitted twice, and lost 8 by decision. And then he has 1 draw and 1 no contest on his fight catalog as well. But man, this is a really hard fight to pick. You know, once again, this is kind of like a coin flip fight. You know, historically, Tony Ferguson has been the more decorated and celebrated fighter, but really, they're both kind of at the end of their career. You know, Bobby Green, he's a little younger than Tony Ferguson at 36, but you know, he's kind of a fighter that's on the tail end of his career as well. And just with how things have gone for either one of these fighters recently, it would be hard for me to pick either one of them to win by decision, because I think someone's going to get stopped in this fight. Someone's going to get knocked out or submitted in this fight. It's just to decide who you think that's going to be. And I think I'm just going to hopefully maybe this will be a swan song, like retirement fight. You know, if he goes out on his shield and somehow pulls out a crazy knockout win over Bobby Green, and then maybe puts his gloves down at the end of the fight. I think that's what I want to see, at least. So I'm going to go with Tony Ferguson to win this fight. So the lightweight. So I guess he moved back down. Tony Ferguson. This is a lightweight bout. So Tony Ferguson's moving back down from welterweight. So this is a lightweight bout between Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. I'm picking Tony Ferguson to win this by knockout. He's a little guy. Tony Ferguson is obviously fights at 155, but I don't know if anyone's ever seen like how big his fists are. His hands are like really big. So that I'm sure that leads to him having those 12 knockouts. He's got big hands for such a small dude. All right. So on to the welterweight bout between Stephen Thompson versus Mikel Pereira, and I don't think there's any relation between him and Alex Pereira, which is the fight that's up next after this. But go over Stephen Thompson real quick, his fight catalog and whatnot, and I'll just state this about him right away. I'm talking about fighters' ages and whenever their careers are going to come thin in, when are they going to retire. You know, everyone knows Stephen Thompson for having that crazy karate style, you know, kickbox karate style. So he's a very unorthodox fighter. So that's really what he's known for. But just talking about his age, he's 40 years old. You know, I don't think he hasn't taken, I guess, a ton of damage over the course of his career. You know, I'll say this, that he was in the best part of his career was definitely the 2 fights. You know, that was probably the highlight of his career, the 2 fights he had against Tyron Woodley. And I'll be honest, you know, Tyron Woodley is pretty much washed. He's just completely washed now, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, he's still going at it. But at that time, I was a Tyron Woodley fan, even though Tyron Woodley's kind of made kind of a bad name for him recently, getting knocked out by one of the Paul brothers and all that. So got to respect Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for still being a viable fighter at this point in his career. But let's see, he's 3-3 in his last 6 fights, and his last win came against Kevin Holland, and that was ESPN, UFC, ESPN Thompson versus Holland, and that was December 3rd, 2022. So that was a little ways back, but not too much. And then just all the losses, just had 2 losses in there by Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns were just unanimous decision losses, and both of those were in 2021. And then the only time that he got stopped during that 6-fight span was against Anthony Pettis, where he got KO'd. And that was a long time ago. You had to go far back for some of these fights. That was March 23rd, 2019, and he got stopped like right at the end of the round at 4:55 of the second round. Got knocked out by Anthony Pettis. So, he kind of ever since the title fights, against Tyron Woodley, he's kind of had just kind of a win-loss, win 2, lose 2, win 1 kind of career. He was on a heater though, earning those 2 title fights against Tyron Woodley. Like he deserved them at the time. But there's some kind of old washed up fighters on this undercard to the main card a little bit. But Mikael Pereira, like I said, no relation. He's on a bit of a hot streak. These 2 fighters are a little different. So he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights, and he's won 5 in a row. The one loss came all the way back February 15, 2020, and that wasn't really even a legitimate loss. It was a DQ, got disqualified for an illegal knee, and that was against Diego Sanchez. And just knowing Diego Sanchez towards the tail end of his career, I imagine Mikael Pereira didn't need to throw any illegal knees to beat Diego Sanchez. But once again, we're using kind of that term washed up fighter. All respects to a UFC Hall of Famer, but at that point in Diego Sanchez's career, they're having to put out advisories and trying to sign petitions so he won't, these old fighters, so they won't fight anymore, won't get any more brain damage, at this stage in their career. But Mikael Pereira, he's at the highest point of his career right now. Like this could possibly, if he wins this fight in dominant fashion, Mikael Pereira could get possibly a title fight out of this. This could be a title eliminator for him. Probably not Stephen Thompson. And see, so this is a welterweight fight. But in those, I can't say the fights that he has won. I got to give him credit for winning those 5 fights, but majority of them have been by decision. He has just the one. He has one rear naked choke, and that was the only finish in there, and that was against Zelim Deva, and that was all the way back on September 5th, 2020, and that was a card headlined by Alistair Overeem. So that, as you can tell, that was a while back. So shout outs and respect to Alistair Overeem, Ubereem, Ubereem, on his retirement. Much respect to Also probably a UFC Hall of Famer and heavyweight and Pride legend. So shout out to Uberim, eating that horse meat. So, but then all the fights since then have just been, 3-round decisions. One of them was a split decision, which was the last fight he won, which was against Santiago Ponzinibbio, and that was May 2nd versus May 21st, 2022, and it was a fight of the night. So it was, must have been an exciting and close fight. But another fighter, he's only 29 years old, but he has 41 fights on his catalog, 28 wins, 11 losses, and 2 no contests. I guess they didn't. I guess they put that DQ in the loss category. Sometimes the DQs end up with like no contest. They get switched to no contest, or they actually give the win to the person that took the illegal strike. But in the 28 wins, he has 10 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission, and 11 wins by decision. And then the 11 losses, he's been knocked out once, been submitted once, and 8 fights lost by decision, and then one disqualification, and then two no contests. So just going off that recent history there, with all the decisions, how many was it? 8 decision losses and 11 decision wins, and his last 4 fights all came by decision. And I'll just tell you outright, I was a Tyron Woodley fan at the time. So when you're cheering on another fighter for a saga like that was, you come to not really like the other fighter all that much. So, and that's not the only reason. Obviously, I'm going to pick against Stephen Thompson here, more because his age and just his kind of up and down career. And let's see, I don't think I went through his fight catalog, but he has 25 fights in his catalog, 17 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. And that was a draw against Tyron Woodley in their first fight. And, in his 17 fights, he has 8 wins by knockout, 1 by decision, and 8 by decision. And then the 6 losses, he's only been knocked out once, he's only been submitted once, and then he's lost 5 by decision. So, if I'm going to pick against Stephen Thompson here, probably shouldn't pick him to lose by knockout or submission, because that just is never really how it goes. So in the welterweight, the third fight on the UFC 291 card, the welterweight bout between Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Mikel Pereira. I'm picking Mikel Pereira to win this, and I'm picking him to win this by decision. Probably it's going to be a decision win, and just similar to the Mike Chiesa, Kevin Holland fight, that could easily be by decision, split decision, So got Michael Pereira on that. All right, we're getting to these 2 main fights on the card. So this is the co-main event between Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. I'm excited for this fight. I've been bagging on this card a little bit because there's been really no title fights or anything like that. And just, kind of being kind of hard on it, even though I'm excited for this fight. And this fight right here could be a title eliminator fight, definitely for Alex Pereira, considering Jamel Hill, I think he tore or ruptured his Achilles tendon. So, the current light heavyweight champion is out. So that belt is up for grabs. It's up for an interim champion to claim it. So But this is once again just like the Michael Chiesa Kevin Holland fight, Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. This is your classic grappler versus striker type of fight. Jan Blachowicz. That's where it concerns me a little bit for Alex Pereira because Jan Blachowicz he's a true light heavyweight. Because Alex Pereira he's coming up. He's coming up from middleweight, so he's coming up a weight class. We've seen how things go when fighters come up from middleweight to face Jan Blachowicz in a fight. So he's been pretty good in winning fights against smaller opponents. And I'm speaking of Israel Adonijah when he came up on March 6, 2021 to try to become a light heavyweight champion, to become a champ. But that didn't go too well. We saw Israel Adonijah in that fight usually getting bullied the whole time and getting taken down and bullied. And it's funny because the fight after that where Jan Blachowicz lost his belt, that's basically what happened to him. That's what happened to him against Glover Teixeira, where he got rear naked choked, and that was UFC 267, October 30th, 2021. And that was at 3 minutes and 2 seconds of the second round. But let's see. But he's 4-1-1 in his last 6 fights, and his last fight was actually a draw, which was a draw to Megmod Enclave. And that was a 5-round fight. It was for the vacant UFC light heavyweight championship. So neither one of them were able to claim that on the night. And then his most recent win came against Alexander Rakic, and that was May 14th, 2022. It was TKO, but it says here that it was actually a knee injury. So, his last real substantial win was against Israel Adonijah, which I think if you saw the two fights, most recent fights, like UFC MMA fights between Israel Adonijah and Alex Pereira, you notice that Alex Pereira was quite a bit bigger, and he showed that he has like takedown defense. Alex Pereira does, he shows that he had good takedown defense against a middleweight. So that makes it kind of hard. He had good takedown defense in the fights against Israel Adonijah. The last fight that he lost, that he got knocked out, I think that was kind of because he got kind of reckless with his striking. Got maybe a little too confident and cocky. But anytime Israel Adonijah tried for a takedown, for the most part, Alex Pereira did a pretty good job of like stuffing it. But I think he may run into this same issue. I think Jan Blachowicz may have a carbon copy fight possibly. He can get through those knockouts, get past possibly getting knocked out. So that's the hard part for me. I really don't see any other way Alex Pereira could win this fight. But Jan Blachowicz, just to go over his fight catalog, has 35 fights, 29 wins, and 8 losses. So he has, in the 29 wins, he has 9 wins by knockout, 9 wins by submission, and 11 by decision. And then he has the 9 losses he's been knocked out twice, been submitted twice, and has lost 5 by decision. And then it has the 1 draw, which was his most recent fight. I just want to see how long has it been since he's been knocked out. So his last time he was knocked out, and it wasn't a true, KO, left twisted on the pavement type of knockout. It was just TKO punches, and that was to Thiago Santos, not Thiago Silva, but Thiago Santos. And that was UFC Fight Night, Blachowicz versus Santos, and that was all the way back February 23rd, 2019, and that came at 39 seconds of the third round. And I think Alex Pereira is just as powerful and just as good a striker and has the same kind of knockout ability as Thiago Santos. And I just keep harping on it. It just kind of depends on what Alex Pereira is able to do in the grappling game. How he's able to get back up when he gets taken down, using the cage to get back up, being able to stuff those takedowns. The ones that aren't real good attempts, and going over his fight catalog. It's just been going over these fight catalogs for these fighters on this card, and all of them have like 35 fights, 45 fights, and then you get to someone that's gotten a lot of high praise for being, a straight up killer, straight up murderer with the stand up and his striking ability. But he's not overly, he has a lot of experience, as a kickboxer, K1 and all that. But the game, he's still fairly new to the sport and the game of mixed martial arts. So he's had the 9 fights, and majority of them have been wins. He has 7 wins and 2 losses. In the 7 wins, 6 of them, almost all of them, 6 of them would come by knockout, and 1 came by decision. And I think Sean Strickland is the next fighter that's supposed to be fighting Israel Adesanya now, and he just like walked through him, and that was his thing. That was like the title eliminator fight for him to get the fight against Israel Adesanya. So in his 2 losses, he's only been knocked out once and submitted just once. And I would say, last 6 fights, it's almost all his fights. But he's 5-1 in his last fight, and obviously the one was the most recent fight against Israel Adesanya, where he got knocked out. They're saying it was straight KO punch. And I only remember Israel Adesanya was doing the bow and arrows like crazy afterwards, after knocking him out and finally fulfilling his life goal of beating the person that had pretty much sunned him and lived rent free in his head for the last couple of years, but still he's just 1-3 against Alex Pereira, and the most recent win by Israel Adesanya. And I've kind of became a fan of Alex Pereira during this little battle and feud that he's had, rivalry he's had with Israel Adesanya. But same thing, in his last win, he got a TKO win over Israel Adesanya, and that was UFC 281, November 12th, 2022, and he won the belt. He had just the unanimous champion, undisputed. He was the undisputed middleweight champion there for a little while. It wasn't long. He didn't have it long because he lost it like about 6 months later. That was at UFC 281, November 12th, 2022. So just going off of his fight history, I don't expect him to win the fight by decision, but I don't expect him to win the fight by submission. Like if he's going to win this fight, it's going to be by knockout. And talking about a lot of fighters' ages on this card as well. So Alex Pereira, he's 36, and Jan Blachowicz, I want to say he's like 40. Yeah, he's 40. He's just right there with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So you kind of want to ask yourselves how good does a fighter's chin kind of hold up once they kind of get into their 40s. But we went back to his last knockout, and it was years ago. So he's shown that it's held up over the years since his last knockout loss to Thiago Santos, which was in 2019. But this like every fight on this card is really hard to pick. There's no just like that guy's going to win. This guy is just going to run through that guy. And I think that probably is going to lead to a really good card, a really exciting card. So for the co-main event, light heavyweight bout between Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira, I'm gonna. I came a little bit of a fan of Alex Pereira, like I said, over the Israel Adonijah, his fight, and all of their history. So I'm going to pick Alex Pereira to win this. And I know it's not very common. He doesn't have a long history of getting knocked out, but I think Alex Pereira is going to be able to survive the takedown in the ground attempts, ground shots of Jan Blachowicz enough that it's gonna kind of be similar to the Sean Strickland fight, where it looks like, it's kind of even at first, and then he just kind of walks through him at one point. Once, like Jan Blachowicz, if Jan Blachowicz comes out and tries to strike with him right away, then I feel that he'll run through him, kind of like how he did with Sean Strickland. So I think Jan Blachowicz, if I was to give him any kind of advice, I would say don't even try to stand up and strike with Alex Pereira, because I think he's going to get the knockout. And so I'm going to pick light heavyweight Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. I'm picking Alex Pereira to win this by knockout. I don't see him winning this fight any other way. Either he wins it by knockout or he's going to lose. And most likely he's going to lose probably TKO to ground and pound, or maybe even a submission. Might probably get choked out is what I would think would happen. Conversely to him possibly winning if he's on the losing side. All right, so on to the main event. We have a lightweight bout, and hadn't picked anyone to win by submission, but we have the co-main event, the lightweight bout between Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje for the BMF title. And this is like I said, on UFC 291, Poirier versus Gaethje 2. So they're the headliners. Names in the sky, and it's for Fugazi kind of championship belt. So you can have a solid main event here. And if you know me at all, you know that I'm. If you follow this podcast at all, you know that we do New Orleans Saints and all that, and Dustin Poirier, he's from Lafayette, Louisiana, so he's a local boy for when falls into that category. So kind of almost have to pick him because of where he's from. Have to support your guys. And if anyone knows anything about the history of this fight, these guys have fought. These guys have already fought, and Dustin Poirier has already knocked Justin Gaethje out. And I swear when I thought about that fight, I swear that fight only happened like, I don't know, a year or two ago. But then you look back at the fight catalog, that Justin Poirier knocked Justin Gaethje out with TKO punches, and it was at 33 seconds of the fourth round. And that was all the way back April 14, 2018. And this is irrelevant, little stamp here, footnote here is that Gaethje was deducted 1 point in round 3 for repeated eye pokes. So, but that's completely irrelevant. He got the points taken away for a reason, and got the points taken away and still got finished by TKO. And so, but Dustin Poirier, he's been pretty good since then. His only losses have came to arguably the best lightweights in UFC history. The first loss was just one fight back against Charles Oliveira, where he got submitted, rear naked choke, submitted at UFC 250, 269, and that was December 11th, 2021, and that came at 1 minute and 2 seconds of the third round, and that was for the lightweight championship. So his only losses have really only came for title fights, and he is and those are the two losses, the Charles Oliveira and the Khabib Nurmagomedov. But he's 4-2 in his last 6 fights, and then go all the way back to September 7th, 2019, UFC 242. Dustin Poirier lost that by rear naked choke to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and like I said, that was for the lightweight championship as well. So I mean, his only losses have come against like some of the best fighters in the world, and I mean, the only loss where you think, oh man, that's not the best fighter in the world, or that's not the lightweight champion, would have been his loss against Michael Johnson, which was actually a KO loss. Michael Johnson, all the way back in 2016, September 17th, 2016. Other than that, he's had no, like, that's a terrible loss, or he's starting to look washed up, or that he's fighting bums now. And he's 34 years old. He's getting up there, but not like some of these fighters that are 39 and 40 on this card. This is almost the retirement home card, you could say. And on his fight catalog, he has 37 fights, 29 wins, and 7 losses. And in the 29 wins, he has 14 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission, 7 wins by decision. And then in the 7 losses, he's been knocked out twice. He's lost by submission 3 times and lost by decision twice. And then he has a one no contest. And so building up Dustin Poirier, he's the hometown boy, and he only loses to UFC Hall of Famers. And he's already beaten Justin Gaethje by a knockout, even though it was years ago, a lot longer than I thought it was ago. And so Justin Gaethje, Justin Gaethje, he's a crazy fighter. Like I said, fighters that go out on their shield, either want to get the stop or get stopped, basically. And I think I was going to mention that Dustin Poirier's last win came against Michael Chandler. It was like a knockout fight. That was in his last fight. So he had the knockout win over. No, it was a rear naked choke submission win over Michael Chandler at UFC 281, November 12th, 2022. And I'm just mentioning that because Justin Gaethje, they're probably going to have Michael Chandler fight Conor McGregor, and then maybe have him fight for a title again. I just want to mention that because both of them have beaten Michael Chandler. So, but Justin Gaethje didn't finish him. It was just a crazy unanimous decision win. And in his last 6 fights, he is 4-2 in his last 6 fights, and kind of similar. Kind of similar. It's weird. These guys' most recent losses have both came to Charles Oliveira, and that was May 7th, 2022. He lost to Charles Oliveira by rear naked choke, and that came at 3 minutes and 22 seconds of the first round. And that was the fight where Charles Oliveira had to give up his belt because he came in a half a pound over, but still Charles Oliveira still dominated him even with the poor weight cut. And then October 24th, 2020, this was at UFC 254, he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov by triangle choke, and that came at 1 minute and 34 seconds of the second round. and that was for the lightweight championship. So both of those fights were for the lightweight championship, and neither one of them was able to claim the belt in those attempts against, like, once again, some of the best light heavyweights, UFC Hall of Famers, some of the greatest fighters pound for pound of all time, are the only fights that these people are losing to. And then, talking about those fights, the most recent loss since then that came not against Charles Oliveira and not against Khabib Nurmagomedov is the Dustin Poirier fight that we talked about, which was a TKO loss, and that was, I think I already mentioned, it was 2018 April 14th, and it was just a crazy fight, basically for 4 minutes, just basically the first 5 rounds, because starting the 4th round, Justin Gaethje was pretty much dead already, so it ended soon. It ended at 33 seconds of the 4th round. So, but going over his catalog, he has 28 fights on his catalog, 24 wins and 4 losses. And in the 24 wins, 19, almost all of them, 19 have come by knockout, and then 1 by submission. So he's not a submission artist, really a grappler. Even though he can wrestle, he is a good wrestler. He's not going to beat you by submission. And then he has 4 wins by decision, and then the 4 losses. He's been knocked out twice, one of them being by Dustin Poirier, and then he's been submitted twice, and then no losses by decision. So just similar to some of these other fights, similar to the Alex Pereira, Jan Blachowicz fight. Like, if either one, mainly Alex Pereira, but if either one of these guys is going to win, it's probably going to be by knockout. And this is really the only pick and fight on this card that's kind of easy, and the only reason being is Dustin Poirier. He's from Lafayette, Louisiana. You got to show up for the black and gold, a little bit of gold. You got to show that, and you got to support your hometown boys. But he also beat him already. He's already knocked him out. And then the only losses that these guys ever lose are against Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira. So it's just, this fight is just building up to basically let's see it again. Let's see a 5-round war, and let's see someone just basically not be able to go anymore by the end of the fight. So this has fight of the night, fight of the year type of statistics and backing behind it. I'm sure everyone is looking for this to be possibly the fight of the year, or at least up there, even though there were some crazy good fights on the previous card at UFC 290. But I'm just going with Dustin Poirier. Once again, I'm going to go with in the lightweight bout between Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. I got Dustin Poirier to win this again, beat Justin Gaethje again, and he's going to win that BMF title. And the knockout, I haven't really stated when I think some of these other knockouts are going to come, but I think this will probably be later in the rounds, like in the 4th or the 5th round, or towards the end of the 3rd round, when Dustin Poirier is going to stop and TKO Justin Gaethje. So that's my pick for the main event. We'll just go over these one more time to rehash them, see if I can even remember them myself. And so it's a UFC 291 UFC 291 Poirier versus Gaethje 2. So this is a rematch, second fight of a historic battle between these guys. And then it's a UFC Championship, UFC July 29th, 2023. That's this coming Saturday, the Delta Center, Salt Lake City, Utah, United States. And that's 10 Eastern, 9 Pacific time, or 9 Central. And so first fight on the card is welterweight bout between Mike Chiesa versus Kevin Holland, and I was just picking Kevin Holland to just probably sneak this one out by a decision. And then lightweight bout, second fight on the card, lightweight bout between Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. I'm actually picking. This is more probably a want to than anything. Tony Ferguson to get the knockout over Bobby Green, and then the welterweight bout between Stephen Thompson versus Michael Pereira. I'm picking Michael Pereira to get a decision. He's had a history here of winning fights by decision, and usually when Stephen Thompson loses, it's usually just by decision. He's not one to be stopped in fights. And then the co-main event, light heavyweight bout between Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira. This is either going to be a fight that has some fireworks, or it's going to be a kind of a grounded out, kind of lay and pray type of win for Jan Blachowicz. But I'm going for fireworks. I'm going for dynamite. So I in this light heavyweight bout between Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira, I got Alex Pereira to win by knockout. And then main event, lightweight bout between Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. You know, talked about how Dustin Poirier is from Louisiana, and it's just easy enough to talk about that he's already beaten Justin Gaethje before, and not just beat him, he knocked him out. He stopped him late in the round when they fought. So, but both of these guys pretty much don't lose to anyone that's not a UFC Hall of Famer in their recent fights, and that includes Dustin Poirier. So I'm picking lightweight bout between Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje for the BMF championship. I got Dustin Poirier winning again with a late TKO knockout over Justin Gaethje. So this card, you know, I know I bag on it a little bit just because there's no title fights, but realistically, if this fight holds up, if these fights hold up, you know, barring anyone missing weight or getting sick tomorrow on Friday, then this is a good card, just name wise. And I say name wise, and all these fighters that I'm talking about are notable, and kind of the main reason is because they're all kind of old. They're all UFC veterans, but still, you know, you want to watch fighters that you're familiar with. It makes it, you know, you have kind of a closer connection when watching it, when you know every one of those fighters and you know their history. And I've probably every single fighter on this card, I've probably seen close to every single fighter. The only one that's kind of new to me that I don't know, like off the top of my head, is Michael Pereira. But you know, he's on a 5-fight winning streak, so he deserves to be on this main card. But I'm ready for it. I'm ready for this card, and man, if it could be even close to as good as UFC 290, then hey, it's going to be a good card. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you this evening. So can I get a check, please?